Hello, welcome to my talk, Common Pitfalls in React Native Apps and How to Fix Them. My name is Dan. I'm a tech lead and co-founder at the Career OS. I'm originally from Romania, but now for the last 3 years I live in Spain, in beautiful sunny Barcelona. And fun fact, 3 years living in Spain, I know how to say only 2 things in Spanish. The first thing is how to order a beer, una cerveza por favor. The second thing is otra cerveza, por favor. So I like speaking, writing about security, accessibility, testing. So if you want to read more of my work or browse my content, hit me up on Twitter and we can discuss after the talk. Professionally, I've worked on all big frameworks. I started with Angular, I moved on to Vue, and now I work with React full-time. But I'm not actually a React Native developer. So I'm a front-end developer, and like every front-end developer, we wear many hats. We try back-end, we try everything. And especially, I like to try making mobile applications. So I've started a lot of side projects, and of course, I never finish any of them. But to actually learn React Native, I had to find clients that would pay me to build their applications for them. And because of this, I started to learn a little bit about React Native and Expo, which is basically a framework for React Native to help you along. So in my lightning talk today, I'm going to explain some of the issues I've faced building apps for my clients and how to solve them. So in case you don't know what React Native is, it's basically a framework created by Meta, Facebook, which allows you to build mobile applications using the same way, the same paradigm that you use to build React applications, more or less. And unlike other high-drip mobile app frameworks like Ionic, React Native doesn't just wrap a web view around your application, it compiles it and it translates it into React, into native code. So let's start with some common issues. By default, React Native uses the standard font for each platform. So if you're building for Android, it will have Roboto at its font. If you're building for iOS, it will use San Francisco. But normally, designers, when they give you applications, they give you the Figma file, usually use different fonts to make an app pretty. So if you're lucky and the font is using Google font, it's perfect. You can use a package called Expo Google Fonts. You installed it like any other package in a React application, but instead of using NPM or Yarn, you're using the Expo CLI. So you just have to do Expo install and the package name, which is Expo Google Fonts. And then you can use it directly in your component, just like this. Font family, for example, here we're trying to use Lato. So you just say font family Lato 400. Now this worked fine initially, and when you start the Expo emulator, this is going to work great. But when you build the app and ship it to production, and people downloaded it on their phone using the App Store, it's going to crash. And the reason for this is because it's using too much memory. One of the reason is I was importing it just like I would a normal React application. I was using import Lato from the package name. But in normal web development, it works fine. But when you're doing it for mobile, it actually adds all the Google fonts it has in your bundle. So it will create like 150 megabytes of just fonts. And that's a lot of fonts to load in an application. So this one, when you load it like this, it's going to ship fine to production. It's going to work on iOS, but it's going to break on some Android phones. To do it correctly, you have to import Lato from the exact folder the library is on. So keep in mind, this issue did not break the app on iOS, but it broke it on specific versions. Now, as a front-end developer, I like to abuse cookies and local storage for almost anything, right? You need to save some user information, you put it in the cookies. You have a request that barely changes, you can cache it in the local storage. And when I started to build a login service, I was saving my bearer token used for authorization in the local storage. And again, it worked very good in the Expo emulator. But when I build the app and use it on an actual phone, I realized that the bearer was not saved. I was sending an empty string every time. So again, in mobile view, there's no such thing as local storage. So you have to use a package called React Native Async Storage. Fun fact, this package is so good, it's actually the recommendation of the React Native team to use instead of their own async storage implementation. So once you install it, you can pretty much use it the same way you would use local storage. So you stringify an object here named Dan, who is clearly not a React Native developer, and setting the value to the async storage. Again, you can fetch the data from the local storage the same way you would do normally. But two important things are, just like in the web, you have these methods, JSON parse and JSON stringify, that we have to use before we set the items. But what I found different here is it will work again in emulators and simulators, but if you by mistake send a null value or you forget to use JSON parse or JSON stringify, it's going to break the app in production. So this is a common theme I found when building React Native apps. Just using emulators and simulators is not enough. You have to test your applications on real phones. So another thing that popped up quite often is you want to sometimes render text content inside your application. For example, you have a list of articles and you want to render the content of that article. And most often than not, you have a backend service, CMS, WordPress, whatever, where you're going to write that article in. So this will save your article as an HTML, but the mobile application does not render HTML. So you need to compile that HTML string that you're getting from the backend to an actual native elements that React Native is using. Because React Native is not using HTML elements that we know and love, like paragraphs, lead tags, image tags, div tags. It's using native elements like text, image, list item, or view. So when you need to add content inside your application, you have to use a package called render HTML. So you get the elements from the backend, you save them as a string, and you put it inside of this component, and the library will take care of the rest. So it also has a prop to inject your fonts that you may use custom fonts. It also has a prop called tag styles, so you can actually style the content as you want for your application. And lastly, one of my blunders coming from the React ecosystem is my attachment to the end-end operator when rendering components. So I was always used to do stuff like this, is fetching and end loading, users.length. So this is a common getcha problem for React. You know, when users.length is 0, it's going to render the number 0 on your page, which is not breaking your app. It's ugly, but you know, sometimes it's fine. Unfortunately, on mobile, React Native doesn't know how to render numbers. So it only knows how to render strings in a text component. So when you do this, again, in the Expo emulator, it's going to work just fine. But when you are going to build the app, it's going to fail. So to avoid breaking the app in production or random zeros appearing in your React app, always ensure that the value used for conditional rendering is actually a Boolean. So you can achieve this by casting to Boolean or using the not operator. So for now, the React Native community is growing. There are lots of good packages out there, but it's still not as awesome and as big of ecosystem as we have in the React. And it also helps that you have to use Expo to get the most out of it. But here are the basic things that you have to use. Load font libraries one at a time. You can use local storage in React Native, render HTML, and always use real phones to test before the App Store release. So again, my name is Dan. If you want to know more about me, scan this QR code, reach out on Twitter. So that's it. Thank you.